Hang tight right here. Don't walk off.
Sir, what's the reason you stopped me?
We're investigating a complaint. Just answer my questions.
Tell me what the complaint is.
Turn around for me. Hands behind your back.
Why am I being detained?
What happens when a woman calls 911 about indecent exposure on a quiet lakeside trail? And officers grab the first man who sort of fits a rushed description, then discover he's armed during the stop? It doesn't end like people think, because the cameras didn't just capture a bad call. They captured how fast a weak ID turns into a full detention, while the real suspect gets distance. Where are you watching from? Country or state? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories where body cam footage and oversight actually change outcomes, hit like and subscribe. This started on October 14th, 2024, on a lakeside greenway trail next to a residential neighborhood. The kind of place people treat like their backyard. Joggers, dog walkers, bikes, routine. A woman named Erin Wallace was jogging with her dog when she believed a man exposed himself near the trail. She didn't confront him. She called 911. Dispatch sent officers quickly. The problem? Her description wasn't sharp enough. It had general details: clothes, build, direction, plus one key location marker: a wooded cut-through that connected the trail to side streets. That cut-through wasn't just scenery. It was an escape route with multiple exits. Officers Hines and Patel arrived and started scanning for anyone who looked close. They didn't find someone actively doing anything. They found a normal area with normal people. Then they saw a man step out from the wooded cut-through. That man was Marcus Reed, mid-30s, off-duty sheriff's deputy, black, just walking, not running, not hiding. He didn't know he was walking into a call. To the officers, he was close enough. That's the kind of match that starts mistakes. They stopped him and began trying to confirm identity and reason for being there. Marcus denied the accusation immediately and kept saying they had the wrong person. He stayed calm. He didn't escalate. He tried to keep the exchange factual. Hines didn't treat it like a quick check. He treated it like a suspect interview. He pressed harder, warned Marcus about giving false information, and kept tightening the questions. Patel didn't talk much. He positioned for control and watched Marcus's hands and movements. Minutes passed. The stop didn't loosen. It hardened. Then Erin drove past the area and looked over. She told the officers she was confident they had the right man. That one moment changed everything. Now the officers didn't feel like they were investigating. They felt confirmed. They shifted from stopping Marcus to detaining him. They warned him again about accuracy and consequences, and kept him in place while they worked to verify who he was. At that point, procedure kicked in. Detention meant a safety check. During the pat-down, Hines found a concealed firearm. Then he found a knife. That discovery didn't prove indecent exposure. It didn't validate the caller's claim. It did one thing. It raised the risk level in the officers' heads instantly. The body language changed. The spacing changed. Their urgency jumped. Marcus saw it happen in real time. He'd watched stops pivot like that before, from routine to high alert, based on one discovery. And now, he was the person standing there while that switch flipped. The moment Hines found the concealed firearm, the stop stopped being conversational. No more, let's figure this out. It turned into containment. Hines controlled Marcus's hands and space. Patel widened his angle and watched for any movement toward the trail or the cut-through. Two officers, one detainee, public setting, possible sex crime call, now a gun in the mix. That combo makes cops clamp down. Marcus stayed still. He didn't argue about the pat-down. He didn't give them a reason to justify force. He'd seen that movie from the other side. But he also knew something else. If they kept treating him like the suspect, this could end with him in cuffs, his name run through the mud and the real guy gone. So he switched tactics. He told them he was law enforcement, off-duty, sheriff's office. Hines didn't relax, not even a little. That claim doesn't calm officers. It can inflame them. People lie about that all the time. And if you're already keyed up, you hear it as a complication, not a solution. Marcus didn't try to reach for anything. Smart. He kept his hands where they could see them and explained that his credentials were on him and dispatch could confirm his employment. He pushed for a supervisor, not as a flex, as a safety move. Patel did the part that matters in these moments. He backed the request with procedure. He kept Hines focused on control while he made the call for a supervisor and asked dispatch to start checking the name. This is where power turns into paperwork. Fast. Hines tried to lock Marcus into one version of his identity. Full name, date of birth, address, why he was there, where he'd come from. Marcus answered, but he stayed careful. He didn't guess. He didn't fill gaps to help. Officers love gaps because gaps become contradictions. Meanwhile, the trail kept moving around them. People walked past. Some slowed down. Phones came out. Not everyone filmed, but enough did. That mattered later, even if nobody realized it yet. Erin wasn't standing there. She'd already done her drive-by confirmation and left. That confirmation still hung over the stop like a stamp. Dispatch came back with early returns. Not the full confirmation yet, but enough to show the name Marcus gave didn't ping as fake. That didn't end it. Hines still acted like Marcus could be lying and could still be the suspect. Then the supervisor arrived. Sergeant Alvarez didn't walk in hot. He walked in evaluating. He looked at spacing, body language, who controlled what. Then he asked for the basics. What the call was, what the description was, how Marcus got selected, what had been found during the safety check, and how long the detention had been running. Hines gave his version, tight, confident. He leaned on the caller's certainty. He leaned on the fact that Marcus came out of the wooded cut-through. He leaned on the weapon discovery. Alvarez didn't argue. He went straight to the hinge point, the description. He had Hines repeat it. Then he had Patel repeat it. You could tell he was checking for drift. Descriptions get worse every time someone retells them. People add details that weren't there. They delete details that don't fit the person in front of them. It happens constantly. Alvarez asked what details were actually in the original call notes and what came from the drive-by confirmation. Big difference. Then he did the next thing good supervisors do. He asked Marcus for his side, but he didn't let Marcus run the show either. He kept it structured. Identity first, employment confirmation next. Then the mismatch. Marcus repeated that he was off duty and wanted dispatch to confirm directly. Alvarez took that seriously, not because he trusted Marcus, but because it was easy to check and stupid not to. Dispatch ran it properly this time, not a casual, sounds right, a real verification. Employment came back confirmed. That should have ended the tension. It didn't. Not immediately. Because now the officers had a new problem. If Marcus really was a deputy and they had detained him based on a vague match, they were about to be forced to explain why they pushed it as long as they did. Alvarez didn't make it personal. He made it factual. He went back to the description again. He asked about height range, clothing specifics, any unique markers, hair, facial features, anything that would separate a guy on a trail from the guy who did it. And that's when the stop started cracking. The details didn't line up cleanly with Marcus. Not the way Hines had acted like they did. The loose match looked looser the longer Alvarez held it up to the call notes. Alvarez also focused on the timeline. Erin made the call. Officers arrived quickly. Marcus emerged from the cut-through. That made him convenient. Convenient isn't the same as correct. Then Alvarez asked the question Hines hadn't wanted to answer out loud. Where did the actual suspect go if Marcus was detained here? Patel glanced back toward the cut-through. You could feel the shift. That wooded route wasn't just a place Marcus came from. It was a route someone else could have used to leave. Alvarez told them to widen the search. Not later, now. One officer stayed with Marcus. The other moved to the trail exits and the cut-through edges. Radios lit up. Quick directions, trailheads, nearby streets. Anyone who saw someone running. That was the moment the whole scene split into two stories. Story 1, the system finally admitting the detention might be wrong. Story 2, the real suspect taking advantage of the delay. Marcus stood there, still detained, still armed on paper, still treated like a risk, even after dispatch confirmed who he was. That's the ugly part. Confirmation didn't instantly restore dignity. It just started the process. Alvarez told Hines to slow down, keep it clean, and document every step from the moment Aaron drove by. He also told him to stop stretching the stop past what the facts supported. Because now they had Bodycam. They had the caller's statements logged. They had bystanders recording angles officers didn't control. And they had a clock that already favored the guy who ran. Once Sergeant Alvarez heard dispatch confirm Marcus worked for the sheriff's office, he stopped treating the stop like a win and started treating it like a liability. He didn't apologize right away. He didn't debate feelings. He went straight to proof. He pulled the call details back up and made Hines read the original description again, out loud, the way it came in. Then he compared it to what stood in front of him. Marcus's build, clothing, anything distinctive. You could see the gap widen. Hines had built the stop on a loose match and the caller's confidence. Alvarez didn't care about confidence. He cared about whether the details actually matched. They didn't. And then the cameras started doing what cameras always do. They took the story away from whoever talked the loudest. Alvarez had Hines and Patel keep their body cams rolling and asked if anyone nearby had recorded. They didn't have to ask long. People already had phones out. Trail stops draw attention fast, especially when officers posture up and someone stays calm. A bystander showed a clip that captured Marcus stepping out of the cut-through. It also captured the part officers didn't want to admit. He wasn't acting like someone who'd just committed a public sex offense and sprinted off. No frantic movement, no scanning, no bolt. Another phone clip caught Aaron's drive-by moment. Not the whole thing, but enough to confirm what happened. She drove past, looked, and gave a confident ID from a moving car. That's not a careful identification. That's momentum. Alvarez didn't trash Aaron. He didn't need to. The setup spoke for itself. Then Alvarez narrowed it down to specifics. He asked dispatch to replay the key description points in the report. He asked for any follow-up details Aaron might have given during the call. That's where the stop broke. The description had details that didn't fit Marcus, not minor stuff, key stuff, height range, clothing color, something worn or carried that Marcus didn't have. The kind of detail that should have triggered doubt earlier, not later. Hines tried to justify it with proximity. Marcus came from the cut-through. That had been the whole basis, convenient timing, convenient location. Alvarez didn't let that carry the day. He treated it as exactly what it was. A reason to check, not a reason to detain this long. Now the ugly part. The delay. While they held Marcus, the real suspect had time. That wooded cut-through connected to side streets. Multiple exits. Someone who actually did it could have moved fast, ditched an outer layer, blended into a neighborhood, and gone quiet. Alvarez pushed Patel to expand the search immediately. Trail exits first, then the nearby streets. He called for units to check likely paths. He had them hit the places a person would pop out if they wanted to vanish. Parking lots, side roads, back fences, the next trailhead. They moved, hard, too late. They didn't find the suspect. No one did in that first push. The head start mattered. Back at the stop, Alvarez had to unwind the mess without creating a new one. Marcus still had the firearm and knife issue hanging over the scene. Not criminal, but sensitive. Officers don't like letting an armed detainee walk away until they feel they've controlled every variable. Alvarez handled it like a supervisor who'd done this before. Secure the weapon during the stop, verify legality, then return it once the detention ended, and everything stayed calm. Marcus cooperated. He didn't taunt them. He didn't give them a reason to save face through force. He just waited while they caught up to reality. Alvarez ended the detention. He documented the reason clearly. Misidentification. That mattered. Paper is policy. If the report said clean release with no issue, it would bury the problem. If it said misidentification and extended detention, it would trigger review. Alvarez chose review. Hines didn't look happy about it. Patel looked more relieved than anything. Different personalities, same system. And Marcus? He looked like someone who'd just spent the last chunk of his day proving he wasn't a stranger's fear. He kept it together, but you could tell it sat heavy. Being right doesn't erase how it feels when officers treat you like a threat in public. Alvarez also gathered the obvious evidence before anyone could forget it existed. He flagged the Bodycam segments. He noted the timestamps when the stop began, when Aaron did the drive-by ID, when the weapon got found, when dispatch confirmed Marcus's employment, when the description mismatch became undeniable, when the detention ended. Those timestamps would matter later. A lot. Units canvassed nearby cameras next. Homes facing the trail. Any doorbell cameras? Any park or street cameras at exits? They checked the cut-through angles. They checked intersections where someone could have peeled off. They got pieces. Not enough. The suspect had done the one thing that beats quick police response. Leave early. The department couldn't brush it off. Too many cameras. Too many timestamps. Too many people who watched it happen. Sergeant Alvarez documented the stop as a misidentification and noted the detention dragged on after the facts started wobbling. That single choice forced an internal review. No hiding behind good faith and moving on. Investigators started with the basics, the 911 call log, dispatch notes, the exact description Aaron gave at the time. Then they compared it to what officers said out loud on scene and what they acted on. The drift jumped off the page. Details softened. Certainty hardened. The stop started fitting the person they already had instead of testing whether he actually matched. Bodycam footage did the rest. It showed the moment the stop switched from a quick check to a detention. It showed the shift after Aaron's drive-by. Yes, that's him. It showed how the weapon discovery changed the officer's posture, even though it didn't prove the original accusation. Most important, it showed how long they kept Marcus pinned down after the supervisors started asking for actual matching details. Then they pulled outside video. Bystander phone clips, doorbell cameras near trail exits. Anything that showed timing and movement around that wooded cut-through. Those clips backed up two things at the same time. Marcus didn't act like a fleeing suspect. The real suspect had time to move because the officers fixated on the wrong man. The review called out specific failures, not vague communication issues, specific stuff. They held on to a loose match too hard. They treated the caller's confidence like proof. They let the stop escalate on momentum. They didn't pause when the description didn't line up cleanly. They didn't split resources early enough to both verify the detained person and actively search the cut-through exits. That last one hurt. Every minute spent trying to force a shaky ID was a minute the actual suspect got to spend leaving. It also raised a separate issue, the weapons. Marcus carried a concealed firearm and a knife. Legal, not tied to the alleged exposure. Still, the footage showed the officers mentally merged armed with guilty. They tightened control because they got scared, not because the facts changed. That's a real problem. Fear is loud on camera. The public sees it. Supervisors see it too. The department didn't announce some dramatic punishment. Real life rarely does. They did what agencies usually do when the evidence is bad, but not criminal. They mandated remedial training, identification standards, detention time limits when a match stays vague, how to handle on-scene confirmations from a moving vehicle, how to separate a safety check from an assumption of guilt. They also reviewed whether the stop should have shifted into a show-up identification procedure instead of an informal drive-by nod that officers treated like a signature. Alvarez pushed one change hard. Once inconsistencies appear, officers have to either develop new facts fast or end the detention. No more stretching it because they want the call to be solved. That rule protects everyone: the public, the officers, the person stuck in the middle. Erin got interviewed again. Investigators didn't label her malicious. They focused on accuracy, what exactly she saw, how long she saw it, distance, lighting. What she remembered versus what she assumed. The review made a point a lot of people don't want to hear. Someone can be genuinely upset and still be wrong. Certainty doesn't equal correct. As for the actual suspect, the follow-up search hit the same wall most of these cases hit. He had a head start. The wooded cut-through gave him options. Camera angles missed him. Witnesses didn't have clean details. Investigators canvassed exits and pulled footage, but nothing landed clean enough for an arrest right away. The case stayed open. The trail stayed the same. People kept running it anyway because people don't get the option to pause life until a department fixes its problems. Marcus went back to work carrying a different kind of weight. He didn't need a lecture about how stops can go wrong. He lived it, off-duty, in public, while doing nothing. He also had to decide what to do with it. Stay quiet and move on, or make sure the department couldn't pretend it was no big deal. The report, the body cam timestamps, and the bystander clips already made that decision for him. The record existed, permanent. And that was the lesson that stuck. When officers build a stop on a vague match and then let pressure drive the rest, they don't just risk hurting an innocent person. They also hand the real suspect time and space. The wrong person gets trapped in the system while the right person gets away. That's not justice. That's a failure with paperwork. So here's the question for you. If you were Marcus, would you have disclosed you were law enforcement right away? Or would you have stayed a regular civilian and let them run it like that? And if you were the supervisor, what's the exact moment you would have ended the detention? Drop your answer in the comments. Share this with someone who still thinks, if you did nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. And if you want more story times where the camera changes the outcome and accountability actually shows up, like and subscribe.
Hold up, you got ID on you and proof you're a U.S. citizen.
I've got ID. What's the legal basis for a citizenship demand in the parking lot?
Here I ask questions, not you. Are you a citizen?
Yes, I'm the county sheriff. You're gonna regret it real quick.
The ICE agent stepped into Sheriff Darius Whitaker's space beside the SUV and treated the parking lot like his personal checkpoint. Citizenship proof, right now. No reason given that made sense. No clear allegation, just pressure. Whitaker didn't rush to satisfy him. He kept his hands visible and asked for the legal basis. He also asked whether he was being detained or free to leave. The agent ignored the question and repeated the demand. Whitaker handed over his driver's license and then his sheriff credentials, the kind of thing that ends misunderstandings fast. It didn't end anything. The agent looked at the credentials, dismissed them, and kept pushing like the only acceptable outcome was Whitaker scrambling to prove himself. A phone went up from a few cars away. Another person slowed near the storefront and watched. That's the moment you could tell this wasn't about law. It was about control. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? Country or state? Drop it in the comments. And if you watch these stories because you're tired of authority getting used like a weapon, hit like and subscribe. This one turns into a real accountability problem. Now rewind. Midday traffic filled that plaza lot like any other day. Coffee shop line, pharmacy pickups, people moving in short bursts, then disappearing back into cars. Cameras sat on corners of the buildings, pointed at entrances, covering most of the lanes without anyone thinking about it. Whitaker had come in off duty, plain clothes, no marked unit, no entourage, just errands. He parked, stepped out, and stayed near his vehicle for a minute while checking something on his phone. Nothing about his behavior suggested danger. No shouting, no confrontation, no looming around other cars. Agent Grant Heller entered from the far side on foot, not responding to a call, not finishing a stop. He walked with a locked-in posture that said he'd already decided what this was. He didn't circle, he didn't observe. He went straight at Whitaker. A normal officer starts with questions. Heller started with authority. He framed the contact as an immigration check immediately. He acted like he had the right to demand citizenship proof just because he felt like it. That's where the constitutional line showed up fast. In public, in a parking lot, the government doesn't get to treat people like paperwork dispensers without a lawful basis. Whitaker knew that. He also knew something else. When someone tries to run you over with authority, the story gets rewritten later, unless you lock down the facts in real time. So he did what seasoned law enforcement does when something feels off. He controlled his tone. He controlled his movements. He forced the encounter into clear categories. Whitaker asked for the legal basis. He asked whether he was being detained. He kept his voice even, like he was speaking for a recording, because he assumed there was one. He wasn't wrong. Heller refused to answer cleanly. He stayed vague while acting like compliance was mandatory. That's a common dodge. Keep it fuzzy so you can claim later it was consensual even while you box someone in. Whitaker didn't accept fuzz. He provided identification first. Then he added his sheriff credentials. It was an easy off-ramp. Any competent agent could have verified it through standard channels in minutes. Dispatch, database, supervisor call. Pick one. Heller chose none of them. Instead, he treated the credentials like they didn't count. That told everyone watching what mattered to him. Verification wasn't the goal. Dominance was. A bystander, Jasmine Patel, started recording early. She didn't announce it. She didn't argue with anyone. She just held the phone steady. That kind of footage becomes a problem for people who like to improvise their facts later. Whitaker noticed the phone and adjusted without making a show of it. He kept his hands in view of both the bystander camera and any plaza cameras. He didn't reach into the SUV. He didn't step toward the agent. He didn't give Heller an excuse to describe threatening movements in a report. Heller kept escalating anyway. His voice stayed sharp. His language shifted from questions to commands. He repeated the citizenship demand like repetition could create legal authority. He started acting like Whitaker's calm questions were attitude. That's the chess game right there. Heller tried to reframe professionalism as defiance. If he could label Whitaker uncooperative, he could justify pushing harder. Whitaker didn't bite. He kept the focus on standards. Reasonable suspicion requires specific facts, not a vibe. Detention needs a lawful basis, not an ego. Those rules apply even when the person pushing the contact wears a badge. Heller acted like those rules didn't apply to him. People nearby picked up on the shift. A couple of heads turned. A short pause in foot traffic. That low-level attention you get when something feels wrong, but nobody wants to be the next target. And here's the piece that makes the whole thing hit harder. Whitaker wasn't a random civilian getting bullied by a federal agent. He was the county sheriff, elected, public-facing. The type of person Heller should have recognized the second credentials appeared. Heller didn't miss it, he dismissed it. That choice matters, because it turned this from a possible misunderstanding into something else. A federal agent deciding that a black man's status didn't matter unless he personally felt satisfied. Whitaker offered the cleanest solution again. Verify through normal channels. Confirm the credentials. End it like professionals. Heller refused again. His body position shifted closer to the driver's side area, narrowing Whitaker's movement. Subtle to some people, obvious to anyone trained. It's how you start turning a conversation into a detention without saying the word. Whitaker recognized the line getting crossed and responded the way you want a top law enforcement official to respond. Calm, specific, no drama. He made it clear he would cooperate with lawful verification. He made it clear he wasn't consenting to random demands that had no legal foundation. Heller didn't back down. He leaned in harder like he needed Whitaker to comply just to validate the approach. Heller didn't verify a thing. No dispatch call, no quick database check, nothing that would create an objective record. Instead, he tried to force the moment forward with commands. He kept circling back to citizenship proof and acting like Whitaker owed it to him, right there in the open, in front of strangers. Whitaker held his ground without making it a scene. He asked again if he was being detained. He asked again what specific facts justified the demand. He pointed to the credentials already in the agent's hands and pushed the obvious fix: verify through standard channels. Heller avoided every clean answer. He kept talking like the authority itself was the reason. Body position changed next. Heller edged into the space by the driver's side area, close enough that Whitaker couldn't just step away without bumping him. That's how a conversation becomes a detention without anyone saying it out loud. Jasmine Patel's phone stayed up. Steady recording, no commentary. That's the kind of witness officers hate, because it doesn't get distracted and it doesn't get emotional. Heller started giving step-by-step compliance instructions that didn't match a voluntary contact. Hands placement, where to stand, what to produce. He tried to make Whitaker perform submissions so the scene would look justified from a distance. Whitaker didn't argue every instruction. He stayed focused on the legal threshold. Detention needed reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion needed articulable facts. Heller still hadn't offered one. At that point, Heller made it explicit in everything but words. Whitaker wasn't free to leave. The agent's posture, the blocking angle, the repeated commands. Same message. Whitaker warned him calmly that he was crossing into an unlawful detention. He told Heller he would cooperate with verification. He would not cooperate with a made-up checkpoint. That's when Heller reached for him, not to guide him away from traffic, not to protect anyone. The grip went to control. A wrist grab first, then a pull, like he wanted Whitaker repositioned for restraint. Whitaker didn't swing, he didn't jerk away. He tightened his arms, kept his hands visible, and made sure the bystanders could see he wasn't resisting. Smart move. Officers who escalate like this love to write resistance into the report later. Heller escalated anyway. He talked over Whitaker's attempts to explain. He dismissed the sheriff credentials again, framing them as irrelevant. In that moment, he made his real position obvious. Whitaker's identity didn't matter because Heller didn't want it to matter. Then came the slip that changed the whole tone. Heller justified his suspicion by leaning on how Whitaker looked and how he didn't match what a sheriff should be. He didn't use a slur. He didn't need one. The bias sat in the logic. Appearance first, facts later, verification never. You could feel the crowd react. A couple people moved closer without realizing they were doing it. Someone else backed away like they didn't want trouble. Jasmine adjusted her framing to capture hands and faces at the same time. Heller pulled out cuffs. Whitaker stayed controlled. He repeated that he wasn't resisting and that Heller had no lawful basis to restrain him. He also made sure to say clearly that he was the elected sheriff and that verification could happen in minutes if Heller would just do his job. Heller cuffed him anyway. That sound carried. Metal clicking in a public parking lot. Phones caught it. Security cameras likely caught it. Heller had turned a baseless demand into a physical seizure. With Whitaker restrained, Heller tried to take ownership of the narrative. He rattled through vague reasons, identity uncertainty, behavior, the refusal to produce what Heller wanted. None of it tied to a specific crime. The explanations kept shifting, which is always a bad sign. Consistent facts don't need constant rewriting. Whitaker didn't bargain, he didn't plead, He kept asking for the lawful basis and kept requesting verification through dispatch. He treated it like a procedural failure that was getting documented in real time, because that's exactly what it was. Then county backup arrived. Deputy Lena Park pulled into the lot after a call came in about a federal agent detaining someone. She stepped out, saw the crowd, saw the cuffs, and moved in fast enough to take control without escalating. Recognition hit her the moment she got close. That was her sheriff in restraints. Park didn't waste time debating feelings. She demanded the reason for the detention. She demanded the basis. She demanded Heller's identification and supervisor contact. Direct, professional, no room for performance. Heller tried to hold the scene. He attempted to keep talking past her, like the sheriff being cuffed was still just a subject in his operation. Park bypassed him and verified Whitaker through dispatch immediately. Speaker on, clear enough for anyone nearby to hear. The confirmation came back fast because it wasn't complicated. Elected sheriff, active, known. Seconds of verification wiped out Heller's entire justification. Heller's posture changed right there. Less command voice, more damage control. He moved to remove the cuffs. Whitaker didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He rolled his wrists once and looked at Heller like he was looking at a report that didn't match the evidence. Park told Whitaker to step back, breathe, and let her handle the immediate scene. Whitaker did, then started doing what experienced leaders do when something goes sideways, securing the record. He asked for the agent's full identifying information and supervisor contact again, this time with a witness and multiple recordings running. He told Park to request the plaza camera footage. He told her to document the bystander video contact info. He reminded her to capture timestamps and where each person stood. Heller tried to justify it one more time. He implied Whitaker's refusal to provide citizenship proof forced the escalation. He implied the credentials didn't resolve the immigration concern. He tried to make it sound like his hands were tied. Nobody bought it. Verification had taken seconds. The only reason it hadn't happened earlier was because Heller refused to do it. Whitaker made it clear he wasn't letting this get buried as a misunderstanding. He didn't threaten. He didn't rant. He stated what was going to happen next. Formal complaints, preservation requests, and a full review of the detention. Heller walked away with his authority intact on paper, but his credibility cracked in public. Cameras don't care about rank, and Whitaker didn't treat it like a parking lot argument anymore. He treated it like a civil rights violation that just handed him evidence. Whitaker didn't treat it like a bad interaction that ended when the cuffs came off. He treated it like a violation that only mattered if the record stayed intact. Deputy Park took names and noted positions. Jasmine Patel got asked for her contact info and the original file. Plaza businesses got hit with immediate requests to preserve camera footage before it auto-deleted. Time mattered. Some systems overwrite in days. Back at the sheriff's office, Whitaker did something most people can't do after something like that. He stayed methodical. He pulled the county dispatch log showing how fast verification happened once someone actually made the call. He documented the timeline while it was still fresh. He wrote down the agent's vehicle info, the sequence of commands, and every point where verification was offered and refused. The next piece was control of evidence. A preservation letter went out that same day through counsel, not a friendly email. A formal notice telling the federal agency to retain body-worn footage, radio traffic, CAD notes, and any internal messages tied to the incident. Another one went to the plaza property manager for all relevant camera angles, receipts, dates, specific time windows. Then came the predictable part. ICE management didn't open with accountability. They opened with tone management. A supervisor called and framed it like a misunderstanding that could be handled professionally if everyone stayed calm and kept it quiet. The message wasn't hard to read. They wanted this contained. Whitaker didn't take the off-ramp. He asked for the incident report number, the agent's full identifying info, and confirmation that all recordings were preserved. He also asked whether the agent had contacted any verification channel at any point before putting hands on him. The supervisor didn't give a clean answer. Meanwhile, Jasmine's video didn't sit in a folder for long. Somebody shared it. Maybe her. Maybe someone who got it from her. Either way, it hit local feeds first, then jumped to bigger pages because the situation was simple to understand. A federal agent demanded citizenship proof from a black man in a parking lot, ignored credentials, and escalated to cuffs. Public reaction came fast, not just outrage, recognition. People had their own stories and didn't need a lecture to connect the dots. Local reporters called the sheriff's office for comment. Whitaker didn't hide. He kept it tight. He confirmed the basics, confirmed the existence of video, and confirmed that his office was preserving evidence and pursuing review. That's when the agency tried to build a narrative. Heller's initial paperwork painted the contact like a routine check with safety concerns. It leaned on vague language, behavior, noncompliance, unable to verify identity. The usual. The problem was the timeline it didn't support it. Video showed Whitaker provided ID and credentials early. Dispatch logs showed verification happened in seconds once Park called. The agent hadn't used the obvious channels before escalating. Those facts sat there like a brick. Whitaker's attorney, Aisha Monroe, built the case the way these cases have to be built, not by arguing feelings, by pinning down contradictions. She pulled the exact timestamps from the bystander video. She matched them to the dispatch verification time. She requested plaza camera footage to cover what the phone camera didn't. She demanded any government recordings and communications tied to the encounter. She logged every delay. ICE didn't hand everything over quickly. That also wasn't surprising. Requests got slow-walked. Responses came in pieces. Some items got flagged as unavailable or under review. Standard friction. Monroe didn't get stuck in that lane. She filed formal complaints through multiple channels at once. Civil rights complaint, oversight complaint, internal review request. Each one created a paper trail that couldn't be brushed off with a phone call. Then the lawsuit got drafted. The core wasn't complicated. Unreasonable seizure, detention without reasonable suspicion, restraint without probable cause, racially driven suspicion dressed up as immigration enforcement. The demand for citizenship proof became central because it showed what the encounter was from the first seconds. Whitaker also made a strategic choice. He didn't frame it as, "They embarrassed me." He framed it as, "They'll do this to anyone," and it happened to someone with training, resources, and evidence. That moved the story out of ego and into rights. More witnesses came forward after the clip spread. A man near the pharmacy entrance said he saw the grab and the cuffs. A store employee confirmed the plaza had cameras covering that lane. Another bystander mentioned hearing the agent dismiss the credentials. Small pieces, but they stacked. Pressure grew inside the county, too. Some officials wanted it quiet because they didn't want tension with federal partners. Whitaker refused that angle. He'd spent years preaching documentation and lawful thresholds. If he folded now, everything he'd enforced on his own deputies would look fake. So he stayed consistent. Monroe filed in federal court once the evidence package was strong enough to box the agency in. Not a vague complaint, a timeline-driven one. Video references, dispatch references, verification references, specific actions tied to specific constitutional limits. And that's when things shifted behind the scenes. Because once it's in court, the game changes. Depositions get scheduled, records get compelled. People have to answer under oath. Reports can't hide behind vague words when a video shows the opposite. Whitaker didn't need revenge. He needed accountability that would survive excuses. Once the lawsuit landed, nobody could hide behind vague wording anymore. Monroe requested everything: the agent's reports, internal emails, radio traffic, any video, any notes about suspicion, and any policy the agent claimed to rely on. Then came depositions. Heller's story didn't hold up under structured questions. His reasons kept shifting. One minute it was identity. Next it was behavior. Then it was safety. The record didn't match any of it. Whitaker had provided ID and credentials early. Verification could have happened immediately. It didn't, because Heller refused to do it until Deputy Park forced it. That refusal became the center of gravity. Monroe didn't argue vibes. She argued thresholds. If the agent claimed reasonable suspicion, she demanded the specific facts. If the agent implied consent, she pointed to the blocking posture and commands. If the agency tried to sell it as a quick check, she walked the timeline second by second and showed how it escalated without a lawful anchor. Video helped, but the boring stuff hurt even more. Dispatch logs, timestamps, the gap between when verification was offered and when it actually happened. All of it told the same story. This was preventable, and the agent chose escalation anyway. ICE tried to narrow the case. They floated the usual moves: qualified immunity arguments, technical defenses, attempts to frame it as a misunderstanding with an officer who couldn't confirm identity. Monroe kept dragging it back to one point. The agent didn't try to confirm. He skipped the simplest verification steps and moved straight into control. That's not enforcement. That's a power play. Pressure built on the agency for a second reason: credibility. If this reached a jury, the visuals were brutal. A black man in cuffs in a public parking lot after presenting law enforcement credentials. A quick dispatch confirmation that proved how unnecessary it was. A written narrative that didn't line up with what the cameras captured. Jurors don't need legal training to understand that. Behind the scenes, settlement talks started getting serious. Whitaker didn't come in asking for a symbolic win. He came in with evidence and a standard. Accountability has to sting, or it teaches nothing. He also had leverage most plaintiffs don't. He knew policy. He knew procedure. He knew how to explain it in plain English without sounding like he was performing. That made him dangerous to cross-examine. The agency also had a bigger headache. This wasn't just about one agent. If discovery showed patterns, training gaps, or loose supervision, the case could expand. Nobody wanted that on the record. So they paid. The number landed at $12 million. That settlement didn't happen because someone felt bad. It happened because the agency didn't want a courtroom replay of an unlawful detention built on appearance and ego. The money reflected the constitutional violations, the restraint without probable cause, and the fact that the agent ignored verification options that would have ended the contact cleanly. Then came the non-money part, the part agencies hate even more. New protocols tightened how agents could initiate public space contacts without a clear immigration-related basis. Verification requirements became explicit. Supervisory involvement triggers got added for any detention that wasn't grounded in a defined operation. Documentation rules got stricter because loose narratives were what created the problem in the first place. Training shifted too, not the performative kind. Scenario-based work focused on thresholds and bias cues. The key lesson was simple. If an encounter starts with "prove you belong" instead of articulable facts, it's already off track. Heller didn't walk away unmarked. The agency handled discipline and assignment changes internally, but the career hit showed up anyway. Cases follow agents. Depositions follow agents. Supervisors remember who brought a $12 million problem into their lap. Whitaker's side changed as well. He didn't treat the settlement like a trophy. He treated it like a warning label. He built a county training block around the incident, using it to drill one message into his deputies. If you can't clearly state the legal basis, you don't escalate. If verification is available, you verify. If your suspicion is really just a feeling, you stop and reset. He also gave credit where it belonged. Deputy Park's quick verification mattered. Jasmine Patel's recording mattered. The plaza cameras mattered. Oversight didn't arrive by magic. People created it by documenting. That's the part viewers should sit with. If this could happen to a sheriff in broad daylight, it can happen to anyone. The difference was that Whitaker knew how to freeze the moment into a record. He had witnesses. He had procedure on his side. He had the patience to play the long game instead of trying to win in the parking lot. So here's the question for you. If you were standing there watching, would you record like Jasmine did? Or would you keep walking because it feels safer? Drop your answer in the comments. Share this story with someone who thinks rights only matter when you're loud. And if you want more real, grounded stories where accountability actually lands, hit subscribe.
This afternoon, Sheriff's Office, need to see some ID, sir.
For what? I'm in my own yard, man. We just cooking.
Got a call, I'll explain in a minute. Let me see the ID first.
A call about burgers?
James, just give it to him.
Yeah, hold up.
Appreciate it. Name and date match what dispatch gave me. You live here?
13 years, same address.
All right, keep it handy. We're good for now.
This rookie deputy thought he was running the whole neighborhood when he walked into a private backyard BBQ without a warrant, without consent, and with that chest-out attitude. He thought everyone back there would fold. He didn't realize the man he was trying to intimidate was the county's veteran sheriff. And the cameras were already rolling, watched the exact moment his swagger collapsed, and he had to face real consequences. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. Country, state, city, I read them. And if you like stories where people stay calm, know their rights, and force accountability, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't fix themselves. People make them get fixed. Now rewind a second, because this didn't start with a crime. It started with a normal Saturday and two deputies who confused a badge with permission. Sheriff Marcus Bennett had the kind of house that made sense for someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. Not flashy, set back a bit. A fenced backyard, one side gate, a clear private property sign near the latch. He'd hosted the same summer BBQ for years. Family, friends, coworkers from different eras of his career. Nothing wild. Food, music, kids running around. The usual trash talk near the grill. He was off duty, no uniform, no gun on his hip. Just a man trying to have a peaceful afternoon. Most of the guests were black. That matters because it shaped what happened next. You could feel it in how fast the deputies went from checking to controlling. A neighbor had called in something vague, the kind of call that creates trouble because it's built on vibes, not facts. Noise complaint, suspicious gathering, cars parked, smell of smoke. The dispatcher sent 2 patrol deputies from the county unit. Deputy Tyler Crane was the kind of rookie who treated every call like a stage. Big energy, loud presence. He'd been on the road long enough to know how to talk, like he was in charge, but not long enough to know when to slow down and ask the right questions. His partner, Deputy Evan Ricks, followed his lead. The backup brain. He didn't create chaos, but he fed it. He reinforced the posture. He helped make it feel like a raid instead of a check. They didn't go to the front door. That's the first red flag. No knock, no attempt to contact the homeowner like normal people. They walked down the side of the house, opened the gate, and stepped straight into the backyard like they owned it. Bodycam caught the shift instantly. You could see the energy change in the space. People stopped talking. A kid froze with a plate in his hand, and someone near the table leaned back like the air got tight. Crane didn't introduce himself like a professional, then he went straight to control. He started scanning faces, counting bodies, looking for someone to dominate. Then he started demanding identification from the guests like they were lined up outside a club. And here's the thing. Even if they had a legit reason to be there, and they didn't, demanding everyone's ID at a private BBQ without a specific crime is not policing. It's fishing. It's intimidation dressed up as procedure. Ricks hovered behind him, watching reactions, ready to step in. You know that stance. Hands near the belt, weight forward. The posture that says they want someone to give them a reason. Crane focused on the people who looked least likely to fight back. Older relatives, younger guys who didn't want drama. He threw out consequences. detention, interference. The usual, the words that don't mean much unless people panic. Then Bennett moved. At first, he wasn't rushing in. He watched from a few steps back, not because he was scared, because he was reading the situation like he'd done 1,000 times. He looked at where the deputies entered. He looked at how they addressed his guests. He looked at the fact that nobody had invited them back there. He stepped forward and asked the most basic question any homeowner has the right to ask: what business they had entering a fenced backyard. Crane tried to flatten him with authority. He leaned on the idea that a badge equals access. He acted like the deputy's presence automatically made it a lawful investigation. Bennett didn't match the volume. He didn't puff up. He didn't give the deputies the emotional fight they were hunting. He stayed calm and started doing something that makes bad policing fall apart fast. He started asking for specifics: call reason, reported crime, probable cause, consent, exigent circumstances, who gave permission to open a gate and enter the curtilage of a home. Crane didn't have answers. He had attitude. So he reached for the weak excuse. The one deputies love when they've got nothing solid. He claimed they smelled something suspicious. That's when you could tell Bennett's patience moved from annoyed homeowner to professional accountability mode, because the smell excuse didn't match the scene. No emergency, no screaming, no danger, no active crime visible. Just a family event. And the deputies were standing in the middle of it, demanding IDs like they'd found a criminal operation. Crane slipped into the line that exposed the real motive. Not evidence, not public safety. Just assumptions about a group of black people gathered in one place. He didn't say it in a polite way. He said it like the yard itself looked guilty. That was the mask-off moment. You could feel it. Guests went quiet in a different way. Not confusion, recognition. Bennett didn't argue the social side of it. He didn't lecture. He did what smart people do when they want consequences. He made it procedural. He told them they were trespassing. He told them they entered without consent. He told them they were escalating a non-incident into a constitutional violation. And then he delivered the sentence that changed the whole temperature. He identified himself as Sheriff Marcus Bennett. Not in a dramatic way, not for show. Calm, flat, direct, name and role. The kind of introduction that doesn't need volume. You could see it hit Crane in real time. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His eyes shifted. He stopped scanning the crowd and started scanning for exits. His voice changed. Less command, more uncertainty. Ricks reacted too. He stopped moving like backup and started moving like a witness. He looked at Crane, then at Bennett, then down at the gate like he suddenly remembered how they got there. Bennett didn't give them time to spin a story. He didn't let them retreat and rewrite the narrative later. He forced the accountability to happen while the cameras were still capturing everything. He ordered them to call a supervisor to the scene immediately, not later. Not, we'll talk at the office. Right there. Real-time documentation. That's how you prevent the quiet cover-up. That's how you stop the report from turning into a fairy tale. Crane hesitated. You could see him weighing the options. Push back and risk insubordination against the sheriff. Or comply and accept that he'd just created a problem with a Bodycam timestamp. He complied, and Bennett made it tighter. He instructed them to keep their cameras on. He asked for the call notes. He wanted to know exactly what had been dispatched and exactly what they were claiming justified entry. He wanted it on record while everybody's memory was fresh and the scene was intact. One of Bennett's relatives, Rochelle, had already been recording pieces on her phone from the side, not in anyone's face. Just enough to capture the posture, the demands, the tone. Redundant coverage. Smart. Because Bodycam doesn't always malfunction when there are multiple angles. At that point, the deputies stopped acting like hunters and started acting like employees caught breaking policy. The supervisor, Sergeant Dana Holloway, arrived with the posture of someone expecting a routine mess. That posture changed as soon as she realized who the homeowner was and where her deputies were standing. Bennett didn't yell at her. He didn't grandstand. He did what professionals do. He briefed her in a tight sequence. Entry point, no knock, no consent, demands for ID, flimsy justification, biased language, escalation during a peaceful gathering. And he emphasized the key fact. The deputies had created the incident. Holloway asked for the original complaint details. Bennett wanted the dispatcher contact and CAD notes preserved. He wanted the body cam flagged. He wanted a supervisor summary completed that day. No wiggle room. Crane tried to soften his earlier posture. He tried to reframe it as a safety check. Holloway didn't bite. She asked him direct questions. Why the backyard? Why no front door contact? What exigency? What crime? Crane had nothing but vibes, and vibes don't hold up when the person demanding accountability is the sheriff. That's where part one ends, the moment the power shifted fully. Not because Bennett pulled rank for ego, because he forced process. Process is what breaks misconduct. Process is what survives excuses. Sergeant Dana Holloway didn't walk into that backyard smiling. She walked in scanning. Who's upset? Who's filming? Who's about to sue? She'd seen enough simple calls turn expensive. Then she saw Marcus Bennett. Her face didn't need to say anything. The pause said it all. Bennett kept it tight. He didn't rant. He didn't perform. He gave her a clean sequence like he was briefing a scene for court. He pointed out the entry point. Side gate. No knock. No consent. No contact attempt at the front door. Then the next problem. Deputies demanding ID from guests as if a private BBQ was a stop and frisk line. Then the excuse that didn't match reality. Smell, vague suspicion, nothing urgent, no emergency, no threat. No reason to be inside the fenced backyard. Holloway didn't argue with him. She turned to Crane and Ricks and started asking questions that forced specifics. Call type, exact complaint. What did dispatch say? What did they observe before entering the yard? What was the legal reason to open a gate and step into the home's curtilage? Crane tried to reset the tone. He shifted from command voice to professional explanation voice. He framed it like a safety check, like they were just trying to identify people and make sure nobody was trespassing. Bennett didn't let that sit. He reminded Holloway calmly that nobody had reported a fight, a weapon, or anyone in danger. He reminded her that the deputies didn't even attempt the normal first step: knock, talk, get consent, or leave. Ricks tried to help Crane by adding little phrases that sounded official. Officer safety, investigative detention, keeping the peace. Holloway cut through it. She asked what crime they were investigating. Not vibes, a real offense. That's where the whole thing started falling apart on camera. Because when a deputy can't name the crime, what they're really saying is, they didn't have one. Bennett wasn't just protecting his guests. He was protecting the record. He told Holloway he wanted 3 things done before anyone left that yard. First, the call notes. He wanted the CAD entry pulled and read back. He wanted the original complaint captured in the supervisor notes, not rewritten later. Second, body cam preservation. Both deputies. No missing segments. No accidental stop recording. He wanted the footage tagged for retention immediately. Third, a supervisor summary completed the same day with the entry method stated plainly. Side gate entry without consent. That exact language matters. It's the difference between a contact and an unlawful intrusion. Holloway looked irritated, not at Bennett, at the situation, at the mess her deputies had handed her. She stepped away and got on the radio. She requested the call details, asked dispatch to confirm the complaint language, and told them to annotate the event. On-scene supervisor request. Potential policy violation. Body cam hold. Bennett stayed in control, but not in a cartoon way. He kept his voice even. He kept his hands relaxed. He watched his guests, too. He made sure nobody got baited into an argument that deputies could later spin into disorderly conduct. And the guests were tense. You could see it. The shock had turned into anger, but it was controlled. That's the thing people don't talk about enough. It's exhausting having to stay calm when you're the one being treated like a problem in your own space. Aunt Rochelle kept recording from an angle, not in faces, not antagonistic, just documenting. She wasn't trying to win an online moment. She was trying to make sure nobody could lie later. Holloway came back with a short version of the call. It was exactly what Bennett expected. It wasn't a crime report. It was a complaint built on assumptions, noise, people, smell of smoke, cars, nothing urgent. Now the deputies had a new problem. Their entry looked worse. They couldn't hide behind, "We were responding to an emergency." There was no emergency to cite. Crane tried one more move. He tried to make the homeowner's questions sound like resistance, like Bennett was interfering, like he was creating a scene. That tactic works on regular people because most people get intimidated by the threat of arrest. It didn't work here. Bennett didn't argue. He simply insisted Holloway document that Crane had demanded IDs from guests without a stated crime and without reasonable suspicion tied to specific individuals. He didn't call Crane names. He didn't speculate. He kept it fact-based. That's how you build a case that survives internal politics. Holloway finally did what good supervisors do when they realize the body cam is a liability. She took control of her deputies. She told them to step back, stop engaging guests, and let her handle it. She then spoke to Bennett like a professional, not like a defensive coworker. She acknowledged the entry issue. She told him she'd generate an incident report and initiate review. She confirmed the footage would be preserved. Crane stood there, quiet. You could see the calculation running in his head. He wanted to keep face, but he couldn't. Not with Bennett in front of him. Not with Holloway writing. Not with cameras on. Bennett didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He gave Holloway one more instruction that mattered. He told her to ensure the deputies left the way they entered, without lingering, without comments to guests, without retaliatory warnings. Clean exit. No extra harm. Holloway walked them out, and as they moved toward the gate, you could see the shift in posture again. Earlier, Crane had walked in like he was inspecting property he owned. Now he moved like he was trying not to be noticed. Smaller steps, less eye contact. That little stiff nod people do when they realize they crossed a line. The BBQ didn't bounce back right away. That's real. People tried to laugh again, tried to pick up plates, tried to restart music. But the mood had changed. Everyone knew it could have gone sideways fast if Bennett wasn't who he was. Later that night, Bennett didn't just let it cool off. He worked the accountability angle like a veteran. He contacted the department's command staff through official channels, not personal favors. He requested the incident number. He requested confirmation in writing that the footage was placed on hold. He requested that internal affairs be notified, not as a threat, but as procedure. He didn't rely on verbal promises. He didn't rely on trust. Paper beats promises. By the next day, the story moved. Quietly at first, guests talked. Family group chats lit up. People shared what they could seen, how the deputies had walked in, who they targeted, how quickly it turned into an ID demand line. Then the clip started circulating in the community. Not the whole thing. Just the moment where the deputy's energy flipped after Bennett identified himself. That's always the part that spreads first, because it exposes the ugly truth in 1 second. Respect wasn't about behavior. It was about status. And the department couldn't ignore it, because now this wasn't a complaint filed by some citizen. It was the sheriff's home, sheriff's guests, sheriff's direct order for documentation, supervisor on scene, body cam hold, multiple recordings. The chessboard was set, and the deputies had already made their move. By Monday, the department couldn't treat it like a small complaint. There was an incident number. A supervisor had responded. Bennett had requested body cam preservation on scene. Guests had phone video. Dispatch records existed. and the homeowner was the sheriff, which meant this wouldn't get handled quietly and buried. Internal Affairs opened a case that day. Bennett didn't push it through back channels. He did it the way he expected any resident to be taken seriously. He requested the case number, the assigned investigator, and written confirmation that all related footage was being retained. From there, the investigation followed the timeline, not opinions. IA focused on decision points. Why the deputies skipped the front door. Why they opened a side gate into a fenced backyard. What they observed before entering. What crime they believed was occurring. Why they demanded identification from guests. Whether any exigent circumstance existed. Crane's written explanation leaned on broad phrases like safety and investigating suspicious activity. The footage didn't support the framing. Bodycam showed the sequence clearly, entry first, justification later. It showed immediate control tactics. It showed ID demands without tying suspicion to any specific person. It showed escalation without a threat. And it captured the line that revealed the mindset behind it. IA pulled the dispatch audio and CAD notes. The original call wasn't an emergency. No report of violence. No weapon. No person in danger. It was a vague complaint about a gathering, noise, cars, and smoke. That made the backyard entry harder to justify. Next came witness interviews. Bennett gave his statement, then guests gave theirs. Their accounts lined up: peaceful events, sudden entry, aggressive tone, ID demands, and pressure tactics that didn't match the situation. Sergeant Holloway's on-scene response mattered too. She had taken control when she arrived and documented the issue, which made it harder for the deputies to rewrite the story later. Command staff reviewed the footage as part of the process. That's when the department had to decide whether it was going to defend the entry or admit it was wrong and discipline it. The discipline landed in tears. Crane took the heavier consequences because he led the entry and drove the escalation. He was suspended, ordered into remedial training, and placed under formal performance review conditions that made it clear another violation would trigger termination steps. Ricks also faced discipline for supporting the conduct and reinforcing the ID demands. He received a suspension, retraining, and a written reprimand that followed him in his file. Then the civil side started moving. Bennett didn't need to file anything to make it real. Guests had potential claims tied to unlawful entry and unlawful detention demands. An attorney requested footage and records through proper channels: body cams, dispatch audio, CAD notes, the supervisor summary, and training and policy materials. The county's legal team pushed for early resolution. They understood what a jury would see on video: fenced backyard entry without consent, followed by blanket ID demands, followed by shifting explanations. A settlement was reached later rather than letting it turn into a public trial. Details stayed limited, but the department couldn't hide the fact that it cost them. Bennett's bigger focus was policy. He issued a directive that made backyard entry rules explicit. Deputies needed consent, a warrant, or an actual exigent circumstance they could clearly articulate. He also added a supervisor review requirement for any complaint involving warrantless entry into residential curtilage, with same-shift documentation. Training changed to match the policy. Deputies ran scenarios where they had to state their legal grounds on camera before acting. If they couldn't explain it, they didn't get to do it. Dispatch procedures changed too. Call takers were instructed to ask more clarifying questions on vague, suspicious gathering complaints, so perception wouldn't get treated like probable cause. Weeks later, Bennett hosted another BBQ. People showed up, but the conversation had changed. Guests talked about what to do if officers entered private property: stay calm, ask the reason, ask for a supervisor, and document what happens. That was the real aftermath, not just punishment. A shift in how people and the department approached the line between authority and rights. So here's the question. If officers walked into your backyard and started demanding IDs, what would you do first? Comment it. Share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stick around.
Hey, hold up. What are you doing here?
I live here. What's the reason you stopped me?
Let me see your ID.
That's my house. What do you want?
We've had break-ins, and you seem too suspicious for me.
Standing in my own driveway isn't suspicious.
Let's clear it up. Show what's inside your bag.
No, I don't allow.
What happens when a patrol officer decides a black homeowner doesn't belong on her own street, then blocks her driveway, demands ID, and reaches for her wrist without a real crime? The answer hits different when you realize the cameras didn't just catch a rude stop. They caught an unlawful detention being built in real time. Quick thing, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you stay for stories where power gets checked by facts and accountability, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't end the way they should unless somebody keeps a clean record. Now, rewind. It was near dusk in a quiet neighborhood. Porch lights started coming on. People watered plants. Kids' bikes leaned against garages. Normal. Nia Carter pulled into her driveway, got out, and started walking back from her car with her bag. That was it. No rushing, no hiding, no weird behavior. Just a resident doing resident stuff. A patrol car rolled through slow. The officer saw her, then slowed even more. He decided she didn't fit. That's the part nobody admits out loud, but it drove everything that came next. He swung his unit in and parked at an angle that cut off her path. Not a friendly pull-up, a move that said, control. He stepped out and started pressing her immediately. He demanded to know what she was doing. He demanded to know where she lived. He demanded ID. Nia didn't match his energy. She stayed steady. She told him she lived there. She pointed to the house. She asked what crime he was investigating. He didn't answer with a crime. He answered with vibes. He leaned on the usual vague pile. He referenced recent break-ins. Said she looked suspicious. Said he was just checking. He tried to make it sound routine, like the problem was her for noticing. Then he pushed the interaction into a trap. Consent. He angled toward her bag and tried to get her to clear it up by letting him look inside. He framed it like a favor, like it would make everything easier. Nia declined, not loudly, not dramatically, just a clear no. The officer didn't accept no as an answer. He treated it like an offense. He stepped closer. He started giving commands that didn't match the situation. He ordered her to stand in a specific spot. He told her to keep her hands visible. He positioned himself so she wasn't moving toward her own front door. That's a real tactic. You isolate the person. You control the space. You create the look of authority and the feel of danger. Then you write the report later like it was necessary. Nia didn't play into it. She repeated the basics. She lived there. She hadn't broken any law. She wanted to know what specific crime he suspected. He couldn't lock one in. So his story started shifting. First it was break-ins. Then it was a general check. Then it was her behavior. He kept changing the reason because he never had one that held up. And when his words stopped working, he moved to the next tool. Pressure. He implied she was refusing to cooperate. He made it sound like her calm boundary was the problem. He tried to turn voluntary compliance into a test of innocence. That's how these situations flip. You say no to a search and suddenly you're difficult. Nia stayed controlled anyway. She didn't hand him consent. She didn't hand him a narrative. She gave him only what she had to give. The officer didn't like that. He escalated again. He told her he was going to detain her until he sorted it out. No clear crime, no clear facts, just a decision. His decision. He reached for her wrist like the next step was physical restraint. And that's the second everything changed. Because right then the front door opened. Her husband stepped onto the porch, took in the spacing, the angle of the cruiser, the way the officer tried to move Nia away from her own door, and the hand reaching in. He didn't react like a random neighbor. He reacted like a federal attorney who'd seen how this gets rewritten when nobody checks the first draft. He started walking down the steps, calm pace, direct focus, and he was about to force the officer to pick one thing and stick to it, facts or nothing. Daniel Carter didn't step outside to argue feelings. He stepped outside to control the record, He moved down the walkway and stopped at a safe distance, where the body cam would catch him clearly. He kept his hands visible too, not because he had to, because he knew how officers write aggressive into a report when they need cover. He looked at the officer's hand near Nia's wrist and made it simple. He asked what specific crime the officer suspected right now. Not a general problem in the area, not a rumor, a specific crime tied to her. The officer tried to answer with the same fog. He referenced break-ins again. He described her as out of place. He implied he was preventing something. Daniel didn't let him float. He asked what specific facts made Nia look like a suspect instead of a homeowner walking from her own car. He asked what the officer observed before blocking her driveway. He asked what dispatch call sent him there. The officer didn't have a dispatch call. That was the issue. So his explanation shifted again. He pivoted to officer safety. He pivoted to refusal. He tried to make her declining a search sound like she'd done something wrong. Daniel cut that off too. He stated clearly that refusal of a voluntary search didn't create suspicion. He stated that Nia did not consent to any search of her bag, her person, or her property. He repeated it so it would land on audio. Then he forced the officer into a yes or no lane. He asked whether Nia was being detained or whether she was free to go into her house. He asked if the officer planned to physically restrain her. He asked if the officer believed he had probable cause for an arrest. The officer hesitated. You could feel it. That moment where he wanted control but didn't want responsibility. He tried to keep it in the gray area. He acted like it was just a conversation while still standing in a way that blocked Nia from her own front door. He kept giving commands. Stand here. Hands visible. Don't move. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He got sharper. He asked for the officer's name and badge number. He asked for a supervisor to respond immediately. He said he wanted it documented that the officer had blocked the driveway and attempted to detain a resident without a clear crime. That's when the neighborhood started waking up. A curtain moved. A porch door opened across the street. Someone stepped out with a phone held low, pretending not to record while recording anyway. Doorbell cameras stared from multiple angles. One across the street, one next door. Nia's own, mounted right above the porch light. The officer noticed the attention and got tighter. He tried to regain dominance by talking louder and faster. He kept circling back to how Nia could make it easy by cooperating. Daniel didn't bite. He asked again, what facts, what crime, what authority? The officer tried to backfill. He claimed he saw her checking cars. He implied she was lurking. He implied she was about to break in. The problem was the scene didn't match that story at all. She was in her driveway. She'd walked from her own car. She'd pointed at her house. Calm the entire time. Daniel called that out without drama. He described what actually happened in plain language, step by step, so the body cam would capture a clean timeline from a credible voice. The officer made a choice in that moment. He either had to let her go, or he had to commit to detaining her and risk getting exposed for it. He went halfway, the worst kind of halfway. He said he was going to hold her there until a supervisor arrived. Like that solved the legal problem. Like waiting made the reason appear. Daniel stayed planted and repeated the same boundary. No consent, no physical contact, and no moving Nia away from her door. And while all of that played out, dispatch finally crackled back. A supervisor was en route. That's when the officer's face changed just a little. Not fear, calculation. Because now it wasn't just him and a homeowner anymore. Now it was witnesses, cameras, a federal attorney, and a decision he couldn't quietly undo once someone else showed up. The supervisor pulled up fast. Not lights and sirens, just quick, controlled. Like he'd been told this was turning into a problem. He parked behind the angled cruiser and got out already scanning. Nia by her driveway. The officer squared up like he was holding a perimeter. Daniel on the walkway with that calm posture that reads like, I'm not leaving and I'm not confused. The supervisor walked in and didn't start with a speech. He started with a short reset. He separated the space. He told the officer to step back with him a few feet, not a friendly move, a management move. Then he asked what the stop was for. The officer tried to deliver a clean story. He couldn't. He went back to break-ins. He said suspicious. He said refused to cooperate. He tried to make it sound like he'd been polite and she'd been difficult. Daniel didn't let the term slide. He corrected the framing without shouting. He said Nia lived there. He said the officer blocked her path and demanded ID without a specific crime. He said the officer pushed for a bag search and treated refusal like guilt. He said the officer attempted physical restraint on private property with no stable reason. And he said it like a person who knew the exact words that matter later. The supervisor looked at Nia and asked her version. She kept it short. She confirmed she'd identified herself, pointed to her home, declined a voluntary search, and got escalated on anyway. No extra. No anger performance. Just facts. The supervisor did the math in real time. He had a weak stop, witnesses, and multiple cameras. He also had a federal attorney, calmly pinning everything down in front of everyone. So the supervisor took the quickest exit. He told Nia she was not detained. He told her she was free to go inside. He told the officer to return to his vehicle. Then came the apology, the kind departments use when they need the moment to end without admitting anything useful in court. Short, controlled, not emotional. Nia didn't accept it like a favor, and she accepted it like a closure to a situation that never should have happened. She walked toward her front door without rushing, without giving anyone a reason to claim she fled or acted nervous. Daniel didn't let the supervisor leave without locking down one more thing. He asked for the supervisor's name. He asked for the incident or call reference number. He asked how to request the Bodycam footage. He asked for confirmation that Nia did not consent to any search and was never shown a specific suspected crime. The supervisor didn't argue, and he answered enough to move it along. The officer stayed near his cruiser, stiff, quiet, face tight, not angry like a cartoon villain, more like a guy realizing he'd taken a routine patrol decision and dragged it into a documented event with a paper trail he couldn't control, because the street had seen it. One neighbor had been recording openly by now. Another had a Ring camera aimed straight at the driveway. Another had a camera that caught the cruiser's angle and the officer stepping into her space. And Nia's doorbell cam had the cleanest view of all. The approach, the commands, the hand going for her wrist, and the moment Daniel walked out. When the vehicles finally rolled away, the neighborhood didn't go back to normal. People stood longer than they needed to. They talked in small clusters. They compared what they saw. Someone asked Nia quietly if she was okay. She said she was fine. She didn't feel fine. She just didn't want to fall apart on the sidewalk in front of everyone. That part hit later, inside the house, when the adrenaline dropped and the reality settled in. This wasn't just rude. This was a near miss. And Daniel didn't treat it like bad luck or one weird officer. He treated it like what it was. An incident that would get rewritten unless they moved first. So that night, while the street quieted down, he started building the record. And he did it the way people win these cases. Not with a rant, with timestamps. Daniel didn't wait for the neighborhood to cool down. He moved first. That mattered. That night, he wrote the timeline while it was still fresh, minute by minute. When the cruiser slowed, when it angled in, when the officer demanded ID, when he pushed for the bag, when he tried to physically restrain Nia, when the supervisor arrived, when the supervisor ended it. He also did something most people don't think to do. He listed the cameras. Nia's doorbell camera, the neighbor across the street with the wide-angle view, the house 2 doors down that caught the patrol car's approach, the phone video from the porch watcher who didn't realize how useful their shaky clip would become. Then he filed the formal complaint. Not a social post, A real complaint routed through the department's process, with a copy sent to the city's risk management and the civilian oversight contact. He requested specific items, not all records. Bodycam footage for the officer and the supervisor. Dispatch audio for that time window. CAD logs showing whether the officer was assigned a call or freelancing. GPS and unit location logs if available. Any prior calls for service on that street? The officer's incident report. Any field interview card? Anything that captured the reason he said he was there. He also sent preservation notices. That's the part that corners a city. Preserve the body cam. Preserve the in-car dash footage. Preserve the radio traffic. Preserve the complaint intake. Preserve any internal messages about the incident. Preserve it all because litigation was reasonably anticipated. That phrase shows up later for a reason. He did the same with the neighborhood cameras. He didn't just ask nicely. He asked neighbors to save the clips and export them immediately, before systems overwrote them. Nia didn't have to be reminded why. She'd felt the moment the officer reached for her. She understood what could have been said later if there wasn't video. Days later, the officer's report came in through the normal pipeline. It leaned on the oldest tricks in the book. It framed Nia as suspicious without naming a concrete crime. It leaned on area break-ins without tying them to her behavior. It used refused to cooperate, as if declining a voluntary search was the same as resisting lawful orders. It described his actions like calm procedure. The video didn't match. The doorbell footage showed Nia walking from her own car, normal pace, normal posture. No casing, no hiding, no checking doors. It showed the cruiser angle that boxed her in. It showed the officer stepping into her space after she declined the search. It showed the wrist reach, clear as day. The body cam made it worse for the city, not because it showed screaming, because it showed emptiness. No stable reason. No single consistent story. Just shifting explanations every time Daniel pressed for specifics. Then came the next phase. The claim. Daniel filed the notice with the city, civil rights, unlawful detention, attempted arrest without probable cause, retaliatory escalation after refusing consent. And because Nia was on her own property, the optics got uglier fast. The city's first response tried to minimize it. They leaned on discretion. They leaned on community caretaking. They leaned on reasonable suspicion without explaining what created it. Discovery didn't care about their vibe-based defense. The timeline locked in. The dispatch logs showed no call that required him to be there. The radio traffic showed him scrambling once he realized the supervisor was coming. The body cam captured him trying to justify the stop after the fact. And the neighborhood footage? That footage was neutral. It didn't argue. It just showed what happened. Now the city had a choice. Fight and risk a public trial where their own video played on a loop, or settle and control the damage. They also had another internal problem. Credibility. Once a court saw the report language next to the footage, every other report from that officer became a question mark. Defense attorneys love that. Prosecutors hate it. Departments fear it. An officer who can't be trusted on paper becomes a liability everywhere. That's why the pressure shifted behind the scenes. Meetings happened. Emails flew. The city started talking policy changes while pretending it wasn't connected. The department reviewed the stop like it was a training opportunity, but everyone involved understood the real issue. The stop wasn't weak. It was empty. And Nia wasn't the one who made it a big deal. The officer did when he treated her existence in that neighborhood like a problem that needed force. The city tried to keep it quiet. That was the first move. They offered an early resolution path, the kind that sounds like, we'd like to put this behind everyone. They didn't say they were wrong. They just wanted it gone. Daniel didn't treat it like a negotiation about feelings. He treated it like leverage. He had video. He had logs. He had a report that didn't match reality. He had witnesses. And he had one more thing the city couldn't afford, an officer whose credibility had become a problem on paper. Once that happened, the case stopped being just about Naya. It became about every arrest and every stop that officer had ever justified with the same vague language. That's when the city's tone changed. The settlement talks got serious. Not because they suddenly cared, because they saw the risk. A trial would have forced the department to explain, in public, why a black woman standing in her own driveway got treated like a burglary suspect, with footage playing, with the officers' shifting explanations laid out, with a supervisor ending it because the foundation was weak. So the city paid. Not a symbolic check. A real number. Big enough to hurt the budget line. Big enough to make somebody above the police chief ask why this ever happened. The money wasn't the only part. The policy changes mattered more. The department updated stop guidance around suspicious person calls and self-initiated contacts. They tightened the requirements for detentions on private property. They made supervisors respond faster when an officer escalated a consensual encounter into a detention. They also changed how consent searches had to be documented because she refused couldn't be used as a justification anymore. They didn't label it because of Naya. Departments rarely do. They just changed the rules like it was coincidence. Inside the department, the officer didn't walk away untouched. He got pulled off street duty while the investigation ran. Then came discipline. The exact internal labels didn't matter as much as the outcome. The department couldn't keep putting him in situations where his word mattered. Because after this, his word didn't matter the same way. Defense attorneys would request this footage in every case he touched. Prosecutors would hesitate to call him a clean witness. Supervisors would treat him like a liability. That's how careers end in policing. Not always with a dramatic firing. Sometimes with a slow collapse of trust. In this case, it ended faster. He left the department. Whether they called it resignation, termination, or separation, the reality was the same. He couldn't keep the job once credibility cracked. And that brings us to the point people miss when they watch these stories. Nia didn't win because her husband had a title. She survived the encounter because she stayed calm, asked the right question, and didn't hand over consent just to make an officer feel better. She didn't argue in circles. She didn't give the officer extra material. She kept it tight. And when the officer tried to turn nothing into a detention, the situation got captured clearly enough that the system couldn't pretend it never happened. That's the lesson. Most bad encounters rely on two things: confusion in the moment and rewriting afterward. Nia cut off the confusion. Daniel cut off the rewrite. Now you tell me. If you were in your own driveway and an officer blocked your path and demanded ID without a real crime, what would you do? Would you stay calm? Would you know what to say? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, realistic, modern, and focused on accountability, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. You don't have to consent to be treated fairly.